For more scary stories and spooky videos, be sure to hit subscribe and click that notification bell. Now sit back and relax, and remember to always stay hungry. Parents. What if you encounter a parent that crosses the line and does something creepy that you would never expect? When we're children, we expect adults to be our leaders and to look out for us, and to never bring us harm. But unfortunately, there just so happens to be a very select few of awful adults out there who take advantage of their position. Here's 8 scary stories of creepy encounters with parents who definitely crossed the line. Let's begin. Number 1. This is something that I've remembered from when I was in primary school, which I found really creepy and caused me a great deal of anxiety. So here goes. When I was in primary school, I had a friend who was in the year below me. Her name was Polly. I think we were around 10 or 11 years old at the time, and we met at our after-school club and basically just became really good friends and spent a lot of time together in and out of school. Polly's parents were divorced, but she lived with her mom about 10 minutes away from me, so she would come to my house and I would go to hers. It wasn't until one day when Polly's dad picked her up from our after-school club when I started to feel uncomfortable. Her parents would take turns to pick her up. One evening, the after-school club was nearing closing time, and it was the two of us plus one other waiting to be picked up. Her dad arrived and Polly introduced me to him. He was tall, had curly ginger hair, and wore a suit and glasses. He looked pretty normal for the most part, but what I remember was that he just stared at me for about 3 minutes and nodded while Polly was rambling about me coming over for dinner next time, or something like that. There were a few occasions after that where her dad took us swimming but watched us from the benches upstairs, and I remember that whenever I happened to look up, he would be staring, although it would be easy to say he was just keeping an eye on us, but honestly, this guy never even smiled. He just stared, and it was unnerving to say the least. There was another time when he took us to a barbecue, and whenever I would catch his eye, it's like he was trying to stare me down, and the whole thing just made me so uncomfortable. One evening when we were at our after-school club, I decided to ask Polly what her parents thought of me. I felt sick with anxiety when she told me she had asked her dad if I could sleep over, and he said something like,
"Of course, she's a nice girl. She's very pretty."
Polly had then said, "Do you fancy her, Dad?" And she said that her dad looked away and didn't answer. Whenever I think about this now, more than 10 years later, I think about how weird it would be for a child to ask their dad that kind of question, so I really don't know if she was making it up or not. Either way, after that incident happened, I tried to distance myself from her, but I would still notice her dad staring at me whenever he came to pick her up. I ignored it and eventually I ended up moving schools, but whenever I remember it, I still get the creeps from it. Number 2. Before I start off on this story, I just want to state that I changed names in this story and omitted them entirely when necessary. This happened this morning at about 10 a.m. Working full-time and as a full-time student leaves me with very little time under normal circumstances. Classes just ended not long ago and lots of folks have left my university to go back home for the holidays. I work in a coffee shop, so people going back home means that not only am I catching a break from school right now, but work is usually super slow as well, and this has been beyond beneficial for my mental health. I usually reserve the use of marijuana for times when my UC is flaring up, or to gain back my appetite lost for the same reason, as I somehow ended up working 9 to 5 Monday through Friday this week, with the entire weekend off, and me recovering from a mild hangover from last night. I figured I could probably smoke before lunch, play some video, and be useful by the time lunch needs to be made. I roll one, slide the balcony door over, and smoke. This is fine, I tell myself. I deserve this after a long week, some time to myself. I have nothing to do today, so I'm sure being high in the middle of day won't be an issue. I don't have to see anyone today. After patting myself on the back for a few minutes more than needed, I slid the door shut and huddled up in a blanket on the couch. I was the only one awake in my apartment this morning, and I could hear someone in the hallway. All of a sudden, there are 3 hurried knocks at my door, and I bolt up. Oh crap, did I forget someone was coming over to meet me? I think as I look through the peephole to see a middle-aged man with Homer Simpson hair, transition lenses, and a handful of gold-colored wrapped presents. He's also messing around on his phone when I look out, and I see the unit directly across the hall is getting Domino's, and the driver is standing in their doorway. Not feeling uneasy considering the audience, I open the door. This man then greets me and starts to walk in. I stand firm in the doorway, and once he realizes I'm not moving, he sticks his hand out. So I shake his hand back firm while staring him in the eye, still confused on what's going on. Keep in mind that though I was trying to look tough, I'm a fair-skinned blonde man with cracked lips. I'm in my PJs and my eyes are definitely red and glossy.
I'm her father,
He tells me. I could have sworn that I remember our roommate mentioning that her father is a tall black man, and this gentleman was not only white but probably standing at about 5 foot solid. Oh, you're Linda's father? I asked. It was very important that I said her name. Let me go let her know you're here. Hold on, I said. And I made my way down the hallway to knock on her bedroom door, next to my fiancé and I's shared room. I go and knock and say that there's a visitor for her, and by the time I knock, he is right behind me, still messing around with his phone, all the while holding those presents in his hands. Now I have to do the awkward slide by him in my own apartment. I figured I'd leave them be. He seemed beyond excited to be here to visit his daughter, so I made my way back to the living room. Before I could even lie down again, I hear,
"No, I'm Jane's father,"
from down the hall. This guy isn't here for my roommate. He's either lost or actively trying to see our apartment for some reason, I thought to myself. I bolt right up and made my way down the hallway, half tripping over things since I'm sitting at about an 8 at this point. As I see him going for the doorknob to my bedroom where my fiancé is sleeping at, I got a little loud, which is usually not in my character. However, I'm high on my last day off and there's a stranger possessing far too many red flags about to walk in on the love of my life, and I then told him that he's in the wrong unit. As I tell him this, he must have been dialing on his phone while talking to my roommate, because he pulls his phone to his face and says,
"I'm here, baby,"
and tries to ignore me. I repeated myself a little louder and he asks where she is. "Unit 14, I'll show you the door," I replied. The pizza guy's still there in the doorway when I send him out, and Terry was asking his phone which floor she's on. That's when I realized that this entire thing happened within the time span of about 2 minutes. The pizza guy and I share a look of solidarity as I lock my door. My roommate came out and we chatted about how freaking weird it was, and she laughed since somehow I handled it really well. I logged into PlayStation to let the story out to one of my mates over a few matches of Overwatch. Here's where things get interesting. So it's around 2 p.m. and my fiancé wakes up. We both had a long night. I only wound up having about a drink or two thanks to my UC and IBS limiting me from going all out. But my fiancé went buck wild before bed and was nursing a bad hangover. I was sober by this point and mostly over the whole ordeal, having had a nap since then, and it almost felt like it was a dream. I mentioned offhand that a man came by and she says that it kind of woke her up. She remembered hearing someone familiar in the apartment. I then explained the whole story and she asked me what he looked like. This could purely be coincidental, but I guess about a month ago while I was at work and she was between classes, a man fitting the description right down to the transition lenses came beating on the door asking her to open up. Unfortunately, I forgot the exact details of the encounter, and she's sleeping right next to me now, so I can't ask and wake her up. But he seems to keep thinking our unit is someone else's, or he's just trying to get a viewing of our fully furnished unit without the tour guide. Whenever I think about it, it leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. I mostly just wanted to get this off of my chest, but Terry, let's not meet again, or you just might be getting a better view of our apartment than you'd like. Number 3. Back when I was 7 to 9 years old, my mom had just started to let me walk to school all by myself, as I only had to walk up the road around 2 corners and then I was there. It was basically the same route whether I walked left or walked right from where my house was. I normally walked left, which followed the main road past our house, but I eventually decided to walk right after a few weeks, as that's where our grade was supposed to play at play and lunchtimes. The right route led to one of my friends' houses where I would spend 5 to 10 minutes most mornings before we would walk down the small hill to school together. Some important information. I would wait downstairs with his mom while he and his little brother got ready for school, which usually took them around 5 to 10 minutes. After about 2 or 3 months, his mom started acting really weird towards me. She would stand closer and closer to me each time we met, which at first, it doesn't sound so weird. She eventually got me to sit in their living room and talk to her about myself, but very personal details like if my mom and dad leave me alone, if I ever thought about having sexual relations yet, if I masturbated, etc. These things were confusing for me because I was overly naive, so I always answered, "I don't know, I never really thought about it." After a while, she would start to touch on my thighs and then would ask me if I needed a nap, needed to sleep, etc. She also kept saying things like, "My husband will be home soon," sometimes once and sometimes a few times. The only person who knows about this to date is my partner, and I never told my parents or anybody else. For all I knew, I probably shouldn't tell anybody because she was an adult. Adults are superior, they know best, and they can do what they want. This is what my young mind believed when I was younger, and considering I've known her for a few months before all of this happened, I didn't think anything of it before I grew up and had some worse experiences. I've kept this bagged up for a while now, and it feels nice to get it off my chest. I really hope that she never pulled that kind of crap on any other children besides myself. It's truly sickening that an adult could take advantage of a child like that. I really hope that I never encounter her again. Number 4. My mother's first husband, Jim, was a jerk. I was only 10 years old when they met at a church. She was the new in-town single mom, and he was the boyishly handsome drummer of the worship band at the church, and they struck up a relationship. He wasn't exactly what I would call her type, but I think she liked him because he was a sweet, laid-back, good guy. He had a steady job, he was good at fixing things, and he at least made the effort to have a relationship with me. On top of that, he was born and raised in the small town we lived in and was friends or family to just about everyone. All in all, he was good husband material. Then came the troubles. You see, Jim was an alcoholic. When he started courting my mom, the drinking wasn't an issue. He had been upfront with her about his status, but he didn't make a habit of drinking, and made it clear that it wasn't a part of his life anymore. That changed after the wedding. Apparently, the stresses of married life are simply too much for any sober man to bear. I've met many alcoholics in my life, most of them related to me, and it's a special sort of dread that washes over you as a child when you suddenly realize you're stuck with another one. I know alcoholics are not inherently bad people, but Jim was a lousy alcoholic. This easygoing nice guy would turn into a raging jerk after just a few PBRs, and whenever he decided to drink, he made an event out of it. Usually he would storm out of the house after an argument with my mom and tear off into the night, not to be heard from again for days. He would eventually be discovered on the other side of town at his mother's house, half naked and trashed by the fish pond, working his way through a case of cheap beer and riding into town on a lawnmower for more. Upon his return, he would be the picture of remorse, call himself scum, and beg for forgiveness. Not just with us, but the good Lord above. That was the thing that always bothered me about Jim, how he always felt the need to bring God into it. If we were having a family meeting specifically to discuss his behavior, he would insist in leading a prayer first. Every time he needed to explain himself, he mentioned conversing with God on the matter beforehand. In Jim's eyes, God wasn't a savior or a beacon of hope or even a crutch. God was a defense attorney. No matter what kind of stuff Jim got himself into, God would be on his side to pull him out. More than that though, and this is what I truly believe, he only seemed to talk about God's mercy and forgiveness when in reality he needed that for my mother and I. As if bringing up God's love would soften our hearts to his struggle. As if suddenly we would remember that we're Christians and that good Christians don't stay mad at their husbands. That strategy actually worked for a while, but the novelty wore off soon enough. Every now and then he would go to AA meetings and he would come home insisting that he was enlightened, reborn, or on the road to being clean, but never attended frequently enough to get results. The marriage lasted 7 tense years, punctuated with stress-induced benders every few months, followed by more empty promises. My mom tried to play the supportive Christian wife for a long time before finally giving up and switching to full-on resentment. Their fights were never physical, but they were ugly, and sometimes they got so loud enough that I was worried someone would throw a punch. Finally, my mother ended things with him. The divorce was quick and quiet. By then, I think they had just grown tired of each other and were relieved to part ways. She took the house, he took the Chevy Trailblazer, and that was that. My mom recovered nearly overnight and was happy to start her life again. After a few months after the divorce, we heard that Jim had gotten remarried. Cindy was a friend of ours from church and we had been close for years, though it was no secret to anyone that she had always had a crush on Jim. Cindy had never been married before, barely even dated, and she landed her dream guy. Or so she thought. We couldn't have been happier for her. For Jim's part, my mother and I decided to be optimistic. Maybe he'd really cleaned up his act if he could hook up with such a good, sweet woman as Cindy. A few years pass. I'm well into college by this point, and my mom is living with her new man in a different city. It's been at least a year since we've been back to our small town or spoken to anyone there. One day I get a message from a friend from high school. "Did you hear about Jim?" I asked her to go on, already rolling my eyes at what it could be. As she started telling me what happened, my smugness turned to horror. Jim and Cindy had been having issues for a while, reportedly over money. The incident started when Cindy went to Jim's trailer. Apparently she had recently moved out and was returning to pick up some things. Cindy's 22-year-old niece came along with her to help out. Jim had claimed he was going into rehab, so they were surprised to walk in and see him sitting there drinking on the couch. The couple began arguing, leading to the women leaving the house and driving away. Drunk and furious, Jim jumped into his truck and took off after them at full speed. He caught up to them and slammed into Cindy's car, knocking it so hard that it flipped and rolled off the road. Realizing what he had just done, Jim backed away and sped off in the other direction to hide. Cindy was in critical condition for days before she was finally declared stable. Unfortunately though, her niece died instantly. Jim was found hiding out in some farmland a few hours after the incident and was swiftly charged with murder, DUI, and fleeing the scene, among other things. The city's golden boy had just sunk himself into a whole lot of crap, and not even DA Christ could get him out of this one. This story is awful and upsetting for a lot of reasons, not the least of which being 2 innocent women were so viciously attacked by this drunken idiot, and that they all happened to be people that I personally knew. But the one thing that still chills me is the car Cindy was driving was a Chevy Trailblazer. The very same Chevy Trailblazer that Jim got in the divorce. My mom's old car. The car that I learned to drive in. I can only imagine how fast he was going to hit them hard enough to flip it with his little pickup truck, and how angry he must have been to have not even hesitated. I do sometimes wonder how many times my mother and I escaped a similar fate. I'm just glad he's behind bars now and can never hurt anyone ever again. Number 5. So a few years back during my senior year of high school, my stepdad made a very poor decision. His decision has caused a lot of pain and suffering for my mom and I, and we're both still in counseling for PTSD and anxiety disorders. For a little context, my parents got divorced when I was 7 years old. I'm also a female if it matters to anyone. I was used to them each dating other people, and I was actually very happy for my mom when she told me she met somebody new. That is, until I met him. As soon as I met this guy, we'll call him Don, I had a horrible feeling in my gut. Don was originally from Florida and he moved to Kentucky right before he met my mom, leaving behind his ex-wife and son. He was a weirdo in every sense of the word, always trying to start an argument over petty topics or walked around shirtless with his strange nipple rings out while my friends were over. Although he was weird, he was never threatening or abusive at all towards me or my mom. That is until one night right before my mom's birthday. I remember the night clearly. It was my best friend's birthday and I was waiting for her to come pick me up to go to dinner. My mom and Don also had plans to go out and watch the UK-Florida basketball game. As an only child, my mom has always been very protective over me, so she wanted to wait until I left with my friend before she left with Don. This, for whatever reason, really pissed Don off, and he stormed out of the house without her. I left shortly after. I returned around 4 or 5 hours later and Don had not come home yet. My mom acted very weird and nervous when I asked about him, and just ushered me off to go to sleep. As I was sleeping, I was woken up by my mom screaming my name. Obviously disoriented, I groped around for my phone thinking I had overslept and was late for school. When I checked the time, it was nearly midnight. My mom screamed my name again and told me to shut the door and call 911. This is pretty much when things hit the fan. I started freaking out and jumped up to slam my door and lock it. Right as I did this, 3 gunshots flew through my bedroom door, narrowly missing me. I grabbed my phone and jumped to the other side of the bed and lied on the ground, hoping to avoid any more bullets. I barely had time to get out my address and inform them that someone was trying to kill me before I heard my mom scream one last time before 2 more gunshots rang out. Everything fell silent and I had a horrible feeling that someone had just murdered my mom. I got up from the floor when I heard the person begin to throw themselves against my door in an attempt to break it. All that was running through my mind at the time was getting to my mom and staying alive. Eventually he broke my door down and I was horrified to see that it was my stepdad. His eyes were glazed over as he grabbed me by the collar of my shirt and put the barrel of the gun up to my head. I screamed and fought as he said over and over,
"Is this what you wanted?"
At this point, a lot of the details get hazy, as I had a ridiculous amount of adrenaline pumping through me, but I somehow managed to back him up and push him down onto my bed. I used both of my hands to hold his hand with the gun away from me. We struggled like this for a while until my mom came in. She had a gunshot wound to the neck and stomach and laid across the gun while telling me to run. I hysterically ran out my front door and up to the street to my neighbors. I scared them half to death, but I was able to redial 911 and tell them what exactly was happening. As I was at my neighbor's, my mom was still in my room with my stepdad. She says this is when she became very weak from blood loss and rolled off of him onto the ground. She asked why he was doing this, and he simply put the gun in his mouth. She took this opportunity to run out the front door right into the arms of a police officer. In the end, the police ended up having a standoff with Don as he barricaded himself inside. He made the mistake of pointing a gun at them and they blew half of his penis off, which was a small amount of retribution, and then arrested him. He is currently serving 45 years in prison, and to this day will give no reason as to why he decided to do this to us. In all honesty, I don't really care. My mom and I lived through it and have grown much closer because of it. We actually got matching tattoos that read, "Strength comes from the madness we survive." Number 6. So, my stepdad used to molest me. When my mom found out, she threw him out and turned him into the cops, and we moved to a different house, but in the same small suburb as before. He was acquitted in court despite being guilty, but I'm sure he was told to stay the heck away from me, if not by the law, then by my mom. One day, maybe a half year after the whole court drama, I was 13 or 14 and had gotten my first boyfriend. He didn't really know about my past because we just met, and I didn't want to be that damaged girl. So this particular day, my mom was at work. I'm sitting in my new house with my new boyfriend. It was his first visit to my house and it was going well. Suddenly the doorbell rings and I run out to open it. It was the suburbs, so I wasn't too worried about who it might have been. It turned out to be my ex-stepdad just standing there smiling. I know now that I should have just closed the door, locked it, and called someone, but I'm scared of him to the point where I'm certain that he'll get in if he wants to. He had that crazy stare that somehow makes that kind of person able to do anything. He had this big duffel bag in his hands and I think all kinds of other stuff. I thought it was stuff he brought to kill me, but he just handed me the bag and says,
"I found some of you in your mom's magazines. I thought you'd like to have them back."
On the inside, I'm freaking the heck out because I knew straight away that he somehow knew that my mom wasn't home. He would never have shown up if she was, but I take the bag and say something like, "Thanks, bye," and start closing the door. He puts his foot in so I can't close it and kind of pushes it open again, looks at me and says something like,
"So what are you doing?"
and starts smiling that creepy pedo smile again. Again, I should have just yelled for my boyfriend sitting in the living room, But I feel like if I drag him into all of that drama, he'll totally dump me, and I'm too embarrassed. So instead, I go in my own kind of combat mode, move in closer to my stepdad and say, "I'm with my boyfriend," and point to my boyfriend's shoes in the hallway, and then he gets a new look on his face. I don't think I had ever seen it before, but as soon as I saw it, I knew I messed up some creepy plan he had. It's like something inside of him just shut down and he stopped having that creepy smile on his face. I don't even remember what he said afterwards, but I remember he just kind of left awkwardly. When I opened the bag, it was just filled with old magazines, but they were all his. I called my mom at her work straight away and told her he'd stop by. Shortly after, she came home and called him up and yelled at him for like an hour. I never saw or heard from him ever again, but I can't really shake the thought of what he would have done to me had I not told him that my boyfriend was there. Like I said before, that look on his face just showed that he had some kind of creepy plan for me. And when I told him my boyfriend was home with me, it seemed to have messed up his plans. Whatever the case, I'm just glad I've never seen him since, and hopefully it'll stay that way. Number 7. When I was 14, I went to school about 30 miles from home, so understandably I didn't see my school friends very often on the weekends. I was so excited when I finally got the chance to stay over at my friend's house, as she was much more popular than I was, and I thought this might be my chance to cement myself in the cool group at school. My friend had always been popular with the boys, mostly because she was very flirtatious and what I would call a tease today. It was only as an adult that this behavior made more sense, so I get to my friend's house and I meet her parents. I should preface this by saying that my parents had not met her parents when they agreed to let me stay over. This is not something that I'll allow with my own children. Anyway, in regards to her stepdad, I immediately feel that uneasy feeling you get when you meet someone dangerous. I feel like most girls and most women are equipped with some sort of sixth sense that helps them determine which men mean them harm. But as I said, popularity is at the forefront of my mind, so I push aside my feelings and try to enjoy my time with my friend. I can already tell they have an interesting relationship though, as they seem far more intimate than my father would ever be with me. I can't totally explain it other than to say that it's now clear that he had already been sexually abusing my friend, and for some time now. The most terrifying moment came while my friend was out of the room for a few minutes. This guy wasted no time in coming up to me, telling me how beautiful I was and how he could tell I was a fresh virgin. I was freaking petrified. He then tells me that he would very much like to be the one to take my virginity, that he has done it before and that the girls have enjoyed it and that I would enjoy it too. I can't remember exactly what I said as it's been 18 years now, but I'm sure I mumbled something about not being interested and my friend miraculously came back in the room. You could tell by her face that she knew something was going on and she seemed so apologetic, as if it were somehow her fault. I get so angry when I think about her trying to make the situation okay for me. I spent the rest of the night on hyper guard, though he never made another advance. He basically stayed away from us, maybe because he suddenly realized that I might tell my parents, but he needn't worry about that. For all the times my parents told me as a young child to tell them if anyone ever touched me, they never really talked to me as a young adult. I stuffed this incident down inside and never told anyone until I met my husband. I moved up in the ranks of the cool people, so I guess I got what I wanted in the end, but I can't stand to think of this incident too much or else I get really mad. I also worry that no matter how much I tell my son to tell me if something bad happens to him, like myself, he might not. But hopefully something like that will never happen. One can only pray and hope. Number 8. So my mom was married to this guy for 6 years before she finally had enough of his BS. I think I was around 9 when this happened, so my brother was 4 or 5 at this point. He was a pretty cool guy up until shortly after they got married. He was a serious control freak and a bully. He picked on me and my brother, so to speak, and treated his own son like he could do no wrong for the most part. So I was probably about 16 when we were driving home from something. Somehow the conversation got on the subject of stripping. I think it's because he was talking about one of my mom's best friends who used to strip. While we're in the car on the way home, It was just me and him, and we get home and we're walking up the stairs to our apartment. And he turns around and tells me that he'd be cool with me being a stripper because they make pretty good money. Another time, I guess this isn't necessarily as creepy. He got blacked out drunk one night, and the next morning my mom and I noticed that his truck wasn't parked the same way it had been the night before. I was 16 years old going on 17. They found some chick's panties in it, so this dude had the audacity to blame me. 1, I don't drive a stick. 2, I don't have a license. I would have had someone come get me. 3, we were on the 2nd floor and he slept out in the living room that night. And 4, why the heck would I not put my underwear back on? Needless to say, their relationship didn't last much longer. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said previously, I know I haven't uploaded a whole lot this week, but that was mainly just because of the holidays. Next week, I'll be back on the normal 4 videos a week upload schedule, so be on the lookout for that. Once again, before we bring this video to a close, let's go ahead and shout out all of my amazing $5 patrons. Ulisa, Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Carrie B, Celeste S, Courtney T, Ellie S, Howard R, Jacqueline W, Jazzy G, Jennifer M, Jess, Jonathan C, Catherine M, Carrie F, Matthew B, Michael G, Random Randy, Steph L, Tammy S, and Terry H. Thank all of you guys so much, as well as my $3 patrons that are also featured on screen. I truly appreciate all of your guys' love and support. It means more than you know. And if you'd like to be a patron and join these awesome people, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thanks everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always stay